$300 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. $300 will not cover security deposit. It will not cover a week in motel off the interstate. It will not get a working man named Marcus Reed within 2 area codes of the real estate market. What it got him on a Saturday morning in March 2023 was a disassembled steel arch at a government surplus auction in Claremore 2 dented panels, surface rust along the base flanges, and a footprint that fit exactly below the county's permit threshold. He had researched that threshold at the public library 2 days before the auction, and he had already done the math on what came next. 14 months later, that same arch was standing on a working farm north of Tulsa. Cedar-clad end walls, warm LED lights glowing through the window after dark, a string of exterior lights along the overhang visible from the county road, and a short-term rental listing generating $1,800 a month in income, consistently, without a mortgage, without a bank, and without a single permit violation. What he figured out between that auction and that first booking is the part most people have never heard. Note, Hook runs slightly over 155 words by user direction to accommodate the curiosity loop close, adjusted to 190 to carry the added forward promise sensory detail and loop line. All sections below maintain their plus or minus 5% targets. A Quonset hut is one of the simplest structures ever manufactured at scale. Picture a half-cylinder of corrugated galvanized steel. Like a tin can slice lengthwise and set flat side down. The United States Navy developed them during World War II because they needed shelters that could ship flat, arrive in pieces, and go up fast on Pacific islands with no skilled labor and minimal tools. Millions were produced. After the war, they spread across farms, ranches, and small towns across the American interior, used as equipment sheds, storage buildings, and workshops. Military surplus auctions cycle them out constantly, and almost nobody outside the agriculture industry pays attention to where they go. A clean mini Quonset in good condition, 12 feet wide, 20 feet long, sells for $1,500 to $2,500 at a surplus yard. But a unit with dented arch panels or rust along the base flanges sells for far less, because no contractor wants cosmetic damage on a structure that small. The dents on the Claremore unit were surface level. The corrugated steel arches were structurally sound. The bolt holes still lined up. Marcus paid $300 cash from a savings envelope he kept in his center console. Running total, $300. He did not buy the standard 12 by 20-foot configuration. He chose a 10 by 16-foot layout, 160 square feet. That calculation was not accidental, but that comes later. Getting the bundled panels from Claremore to a property north of Tulsa requires a flatbed. A man from Marcus's warehouse crew drove one for a construction supply company during the week. He agreed to haul the load on a Sunday when the truck was parked. Marcus paid him $45 in fuel and bought him lunch at a diner in Claremore when the delivery was done. Running total, $345. The interior materials came from 3 weeks of Saturday mornings. Marcus drove to active residential construction sites south of Tulsa, found a foreman on each one, and offered to clean up the site perimeter in exchange for usable offcuts. Framing lumber, plywood sheets with cosmetic water staining, but no structural damage. One bundle of reclaimed cedar tongue-and-groove boards from a demolished hunting cabin in Mays County. Tight-grained, smelling faintly of pine resin, still holding its color. He hauled it all back in loads strapped to the roof of his pickup. Total fuel costs for those collection runs, approximately $35. Running total at that point, $380. He still had no place to put any of it. Buying land near Tulsa was not an option. A single acre of rural property in Rogers County started at $18,000. Marcus did not have $18,000. He had roughly $120 left from his original budget and a pile of reclaimed cedar boards stacked in his truck bed. So he knocked on doors. The first 2 homeowners said no before he finished his second sentence. A third listened to the whole thing, nodded politely, and said he would think about it. In rural Oklahoma, that means no without the discomfort of saying it out loud. A fourth told Marcus he was welcome to park a vehicle on the back of his property, but would not allow any permanent structure. Marcus almost took that. He was that far into the process, with nowhere to go. The fifth door belonged to a man named Gerald. He was 71 years old and owned 11 acres of land outside Claremore that had gotten away from him over the past several years. The fencing along the county road was sagging. Brush had overtaken most of the field edges. The county had sent him notices about the condition of the property. His son lived in Kansas City and came down twice a year, maybe 3 times if something needed fixing. Marcus made him a direct offer. He would clear the brush along the road frontage, repair the fence line, and mow the grass around Gerald's house twice a month through the growing season. In return, Gerald would let him place a structure on the back corner of the property, behind a tree line, out of sight from the road, with access to a single exterior electrical outlet on the barn wall. Gerald said yes. No lease, no contract. A handshake on a Tuesday afternoon in April. 2 days before he knocked on that door, Marcus had spent an hour at the Claremore Public Library researching Rogers County rural building codes on one of the public access computers. Structures under 200 square feet not connected to municipal water or sewer did not require a building permit. His 160 square foot footprint fit inside that threshold by 40 feet. That number was not chosen by accident. Marcus leveled the first cinder block on Gerald's back acreage on a Saturday morning in early May, pressing it into the red Oklahoma clay with his boot and checking it with a 4-foot level borrowed from Gerald's barn. 10 blocks total, arranged in 5 pairs, packed gravel underneath each one. The pier formation lifts the floor frame 8 inches off the ground, prevents moisture from wicking up to the subfloor, and eliminates the need for a poured concrete slab. A poured slab would have cost money Marcus did not have. It would also have triggered a permit review he was not going to invite. The arch assembly is designed for speed. Corrugated steel ribs bolt together in sequence, each one locking to the next with self-tapping screws. Marcus borrowed Gerald's socket wrench set and a cordless drill from the barn and worked through the sequence he had memorized from a YouTube video on Quonset assembly, copying the bolt pattern into a spiral notebook and carrying out to the property in his coat pocket. The first Saturday of assembly nearly ended the project. The arch ribs weighed approximately 38 pounds each and needed to be held overhead while being bolted to the adjacent piece. On the first attempt, a rib slipped as Marcus raised it into position and caught him across the left shoulder hard enough to leave a bruise that lasted 2 weeks. He sat down on the gravel next to Gerald's barn. He did not call anyone. He went inside, found 2 2x4S and a length of fence rope, and rigged a simple A-frame prop that held each rib at shoulder height, while he bolted it in place from a stepladder leaning against the barn wall. He finished every remaining arch that way. End walls came from construction site lumber, reclaimed 2x4 framing and plywood, cut to fit the curved footprint. The front wall received a $15 pre-hung door from the Habitat for Humanity Restore in Tulsa. The rear wall got a salvage window and a 10-inch ventilation opening covered with hardware cloth. The cedar tongue and groove boards went up as exterior cladding on both end walls, the warm grain wood sitting against a silver corrugated arch above it. New hardware for the entire shell. $62 in screws and bolts from a store in Claremore. The shell was standing. What happened next was the problem that stops most builds before they go anywhere useful. If Marcus could not solve the insulation problem, the $300 hut was a $300 storage shed. Corrugated galvanized steel conducts heat with brutal efficiency. An uninsulated metal arch in Oklahoma in July can exceed 140 degrees Fahrenheit inside by noon. In January, the same steel radiates warmth outward so fast that the interior drops below the outside air temperature within an hour of sunset. Summer oven, winter refrigerator. Neither one is livable, and no guest is booking either one. Spray foam insulation, the right product for a curved metal structure, costs between $1 and $2 per square foot when professionally installed. For a 160 square foot interior with a full arch curve, that runs over $800. Marcus had roughly $110 left in his budget at that point. He visited 4 active residential construction sites and 2 insulation contractors in the Tulsa metro area over the following 3 weeks. He asked each one the same question. Could he take the partial spray foam cans they discarded after jobs? 3 said yes. A single attic insulation project generates 3 to 5 partial cans that contractors throw away because they cannot resell open product and it degrades in storage. Over 5 weeks of Saturday morning pickups, Marcus collected enough to cover the entire interior ceiling and the upper curve of the arch. The lower walls he handled with rigid foam board offcuts from commercial construction dumpsters in Broken Arrow. Partial sheets discarded because contractors have no use for pieces that small. Free. He cut them to follow the curve of the arch with a utility knife and glued them flat against the steel with construction adhesive. $8 for 2 tubes. But insulation without moisture control is a trap that ends most amateur builds within the first year, and the person who built it rarely understands why. Warm air from 2 people breathing and existing inside a sealed metal structure hits cold steel and turns into water. That water drips onto pallet wood walls, the floor, the mattress, everything fabric or paper inside. Within months, mold destroys the interior completely. Marcus bought a 50-foot roll of 6 mil plastic sheeting at a hardware store in Claremore for $22. He stapled it to the interior steel framing before any foam board went up. A vapor barrier that separates a warm living space from the cold steel and prevents condensation from forming at the contact point. 2 years later, there is 0 mold inside that arch. The $22 roll of plastic sheeting mattered more than any other single purchase in the entire build. Marcus had $48 left from his original budget when the structure was sealed and dry. Every remaining decision had to be either free or very close to it. Electricity came from 2 damaged solar panels pulled from a solar insulation company in Owasso. The company gave them away because disposing of old panels cost money, and both units, one running at 65% efficiency, one at 70%, had been sitting behind their warehouse waiting for a disposal run. A wooden frame angled south against the exterior of the arch held them in position. 2 used 12-volt car batteries from an auto salvage yard in Catoosa cost $18 each. A charge controller cost $35, ordered online and shipped to the Claremore post office. Marcus learned the wiring sequence from a YouTube tutorial series watched at the library, copying diagrams into a spiral notebook and carrying it out to property in his coat pocket, the same notebook that held the arch assembly sequence from 2 months earlier. The system powers 4 LED strip lights along the interior ceiling, 2 USB charging ports near the door, a 12-volt fan mounted at the apex of the arch, and a string of warm exterior lights along the cedar end wall overhang. It will not run an air conditioner. It will not run a refrigerator. But on the worst nights in a northeast Oklahoma July, when the air sits heavy and completely still after dark, that fan at the top of the arch moves enough air to make the difference between sleeping and staring at the ceiling until 4 in the morning. And that is the difference between a 5-star review and a 2-star review. Cooking runs on a 2-burner propane camp stove on a plywood counter Marcus built against the front end wall. A 20-pound propane tank refills for $18 in Claremore and lasts 5 to 6 weeks. Water comes from Gerald's barn spigot through a 40-foot garden hose to a gravity-fed storage tank inside, part of the original handshake. Drinking water Marcus carries in from town in 5-gallon jugs. The interior layout is simple. Front, a second-hand love seat found at the curb 2 blocks from Marcus's apartment. A cedar plank coffee table built from offcuts. Warm LED light overhead. Rear, a platform bed from stacked pallets. A 4-inch foam mattress purchased new for $65. The one deliberate quality spent in the entire build. A small side table and a hook rail for coats. Total build cost at completion, $487. The hut, the transport, every screw and roll of plastic sheeting, and tube of adhesive across 5 months of weekends. On a Sunday evening in September 2023, Marcus uploaded 4 photographs to a short-term rental platform and published a listing. The photos showed the cedar end wall in late afternoon light, the warm LED interior with the ceiling curve overhead, the string lights along the overhang, and the platform bed in the rear. He described the property as a private, off-grid arch cabin on a quiet working farm outside Tulsa. 160 square feet. No indoor plumbing. Propane kitchen. Solar electric. Full privacy. Pet-friendly. He set the nightly rate at $85. He was not sure anyone would book it, and for 11 days, nobody did. The first booking came on a Tuesday. A couple from Kansas City, 2 nights. They left a 5-star review. The phrase they used was that it was the most private night's sleep they'd had in years. By December 2023, 3 months after the listing went live, the hut was averaging 18 to 20 booked nights per month. Monthly gross, $1,530 to $1,700. In the spring of 2024, Marcus raised the weekend and holiday rate to $95. The bookings held. In April 2024, the monthly gross crossed $1,800 for the first time. Expenses against that number were modest. Propane at roughly $18 per refill, once every 5 to 6 weeks. The platform service fee at 3%. Cleaning supplies at approximately $12 a month. Gerald's arrangement cost nothing, maintained to the same land work Marcus had been doing since the handshake the previous April. Net monthly income after expenses, approximately $1,650 to $1,720. Consistently, Marcus's annual salary at the warehouse came to approximately $31,600 before taxes. The arch he had built for $487 was now generating the equivalent of a second income without a second job, without a loan, and without a single conversation with a bank. The night he saw the April deposit, he was sitting in his truck in the warehouse parking lot at the end of a 10-hour shift. He did not call anyone. He sat there for a while with the engine running and the parking lot lights coming through the windshield. He had driven to that same lot 6 days a week for 6 years. The number on his phone did not change any of that. It just meant that 6 days a week was no longer the only math available to him. He drove home. A man named Darius from Marcus's warehouse crew asked to see the hut on a Saturday morning in November 2024. He drove out to Gerald's property, walked through the cedar end wall door, stood inside for several minutes looking at the arch overhead and the LED strips along the ceiling curve, and said very little. Then he asked Marcus where he had found the auction listing. Darius built his own version the following spring, a 10 by 14 foot surplus Quonset from the same Claremore auction yard. Total build cost, $511, slightly over because he purchased a second-hand propane heater for winter bookings alongside the foam mattress. He listed it on the same platform in February 2025 as a private off-grid dome retreat on a family farm outside Claremore. By April, he was averaging $1,200 to $1,400 per month in gross income. A third build came from a retired school custodian named Terrence, 58, from Broken Arrow. He heard about it through Darius in a warehouse parking lot conversation after a shift. Terrence's unit was slightly larger. A 12 by 20 foot configuration permitted under Rogers County agricultural outbuilding rules, listed as a rustic glamping dome at $110 a night. His first full month generated $2,200. None of these men attended a seminar. The knowledge moved the way practical knowledge always moves between working men, across a break room table, through a text message with a photograph of a listing attached, in a conversation that started because someone seemed less tired at the end of shift than he used to. Marcus made improvements to the hut through that same period. A gravel parking pad using stone source-free from a drainage project on a neighboring property. A fire pit ring welded from scrap angle iron. A small covered porch built from corrugated roofing panels pulled from Gerald's barn renovation. Gerald stops by on weekend mornings when the hut is empty between bookings. He walks the fence line along the road. He tightens whatever has worked loose. He sets things right without being asked and without making a point of it. Marcus is usually not there when he comes, but the work gets done and Marcus knows who did it. The number that matters most is not the $1,800 a month. To generate $1,800 a month in rental income from a conventionally financed property near Tulsa, Marcus would have needed approximately $160,000 in capital for a down payment on a $400,000 duplex. That is more money than he will earn in 5 years at the warehouse before taxes. Every financial advisor, every real estate seminar, every investing podcast would have started the conversation there and stopped, because for a man making $15.20 an hour, $160,000 is not a starting point. It is a wall. What Marcus actually needed was $487 in cash, a piece of someone else's neglected land, a permit exemption he found at the public library on a Tuesday afternoon, and enough patience to sit in the gravel next to a barn and figure out a different way to lift a steel arch rib when the first wave put a bruise across his shoulder. At least 4 additional surplus Quonset builds have been documented in Rogers and Mays counties since Marcus listed his unit in September 2023. Men who found the same surplus auction pipeline, the same insulation contractor waste stream, the same county code threshold, some with no direct contact with Marcus at all. A county outreach worker described encountering 2 separate builds on private agricultural land in Mays County, where the owners had arrived at nearly identical configurations without ever meeting each other. Same 160 square foot footprint, same vapor barrier, same damaged solar panels sourced from installation companies that needed the disposal cost off their books. The knowledge travels the way practical knowledge has always traveled between working men. Across break room tables at the end of shift, through a text message with a monthly income figure attached, in a parking lot conversation that started because someone noticed another man seemed less worn down than he used to be. Nobody is teaching this in a business school. The men doing it are working full-time and building on weekends with borrowed tools on other people's land. Marcus's son is 16. He is the same age now that Marcus was when his own father first handed him a wrench and told him that a man who could fix things would never be entirely at someone else's mercy. His son held the stepladder steady on the gravel the weekend Marcus installed the string lights, the last thing that went up before the first guest arrived. He does his homework now at the cedar plank coffee table his father built from the offguts of a demolished hunting cabin, under an LED strip running on 2 used car batteries and 4 cracked solar panels leaning against the south side of a $300 steel arch in a field outside Claremore. If this kind of resourcefulness matters to you, subscribing helps more people find this video. The video on screen right now covers a completely different low-cost build that generates income with methods just as precise as these. Click it and keep going.